Hi, I want to talk about something that still surprises me. Retirement can feel strange even when you planned for it, maybe especially when you planned for it. Because when you plan, you think you're preparing for the real thing. You think the budget will help, the Social Security survivor benefit, the pension, Medicare, the paid off mortgage, the savings account, the spreadsheet, the adult children who say, "Mom, you'll be fine," and mean it kindly. And those things do help. I want to be honest about that. Frank and I plan better than many people get to plan. He was the planner, I was the talker. He had the spreadsheets, I had the questions. We had the house paid off. We knew the monthly numbers. We knew what my pension would be. We knew roughly what Medicare would cost. We had a list of national parks. Frank had a whole tab for it. Of course he did. Frank would have had an opinion about the order too. He always had an opinion about the order of things. So no, this wasn't a case where retirement caught me completely unprepared. The strange part was that planning prepared me for the math. It did not prepare me for the feeling. And that is the part nobody puts in the retirement brochure. You can plan for the income, you can plan for the insurance, you can plan for the house, you can even plan for free time, although I don't think free time behaves well on paper. But you cannot fully plan for the first morning when the life you imagined is technically here and it still doesn't feel like yours. That was the part I didn't expect. The fear was not that I had made the wrong choice. I don't think I did. I retired when I said I would. March 2021. Same general timing Frank and I had talked about before everything changed. That mattered to me. It felt like keeping a promise to him, even though the promise had originally been to us. But keeping the date did not make the date feel normal. You wake up and the calendar is clear. The work email is gone. The school district doesn't need your answer. No one is waiting for you to review a curriculum packet, fix a schedule, join a meeting, explain something twice, or make a decision that should have been made last Tuesday. And that feels strange. Not good weird, just weird. You planned for rest, and then rest walks into the room wearing unfamiliar clothes. You planned for freedom, and then freedom sits down across from you and doesn't say much. I'm not going to give you a 5-step system. I'm just going to tell you what happened and what I've been figuring out. Some days are better than others. Yesterday was a better one. The day before was a little wobbly. That's usually how it goes. I'm standing in the hallway with Frank's spreadsheet printed out in my hand. This was maybe 2 weeks before I retired. I had printed it because apparently I like making my emotions heavier and easier to carry from room to room. It was the retirement spreadsheet he had built years before. There was a tab for monthly expenses, a tab for income, a tab for house repairs, a tab for travel, and then, because he was Frank, a tab called Possibilities, which was not romantic exactly. It was practical optimism in rows and columns. Grand Canyon, Acadia, Glacier, Yellowstone. He had estimated gas, lodging, entrance fees, and how many days he thought each stop deserved. I remember standing there looking at Glacier. I had never been, still haven't. Next to it, in the notes column, he had written, "Carol will want extra time here." That undid me a little, not loudly, just enough. I sat down on the bottom step with the pages in my lap. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you notice the refrigerator, the clock, the heat clicking on. Jen had called earlier that day to ask if I was excited. I said yes because it was partly true. David called that evening, like he does on Sundays, and asked if I was ready. I said, "I think so," because that was the truest answer I had. But sitting on that step, looking at a trip planned by someone who was no longer there to take it, I understood something. I had planned my retirement, but I had not planned for it to be mine alone. That was the realization, not the lesson, just the moment when the truth got specific. So I want to talk through 5 things that made retirement feel strange, even though I had planned for it. These are not instructions. They're just things I noticed once the date arrived, and the life on paper became the life I was actually living. The first thing I noticed is that planning gives you structure, but it does not give you rhythm. Those are different. Frank's spreadsheet gave me structure. I had numbers. I had categories. I had a sense of what could be spent and what should not be touched. I had property taxes and insurance, utilities, groceries, Medicare supplement, car insurance, church giving. A little line for household repairs because Frank believed a house was always preparing to ask for money. He was right about that. The numbers mattered. They still matter. My monthly income is about $3,130. The survivor benefit is $1,890. My school pension is $1,240. I know those numbers because I write them down. I don't think vague is helpful, especially for women doing the new math alone. But numbers did not tell me what to do at 2:15 on a Wednesday. That was the surprise. When I was working, the day had a rhythm I didn't have to invent. I knew when I was getting dressed. I knew when I was driving. I knew who I would see. I knew the little motions of work. After I retired, the structure was there, but the rhythm was gone. I would make tea. Then I would stand in the kitchen and think, now what? I had a list. Of course I had a list. Former teachers do not retire from lists. We simply change the paper. I had clean linen closet written down one morning. I did it, very thoroughly. Too thoroughly, probably. I folded towels in a way no one asked me to fold them. Then I stood there looking at a beautiful linen closet and felt absolutely nothing. Maybe a little proud, but mostly odd. That was when I began to understand that a planned retirement can still feel shapeless. The plan tells you what is allowed. It doesn't always tell you what is alive. The second thing I noticed is that the person you planned with may still shape the plan, even when they're not there. Frank died before my retirement actually began. That sentence is simple, but it contains a lot. We had talked about retirement as a we. We would travel. We would slow down. We would maybe stay in the house, or maybe sell it, depending on the stairs, the yard, and whether Frank finally admitted that mowing the lawn in July was not a personality trait. He never did admit that. We would visit the grandchildren. We would see the national parks. We would learn to cook smaller meals, although Frank believed leftovers were a civic responsibility. Then he was gone, and the plan stayed. That is one of the strangest things about loss. The practical things keep existing. The spreadsheet was still on the computer. The house was still paid off. The budget still worked. The date still came. The national parks were still there, inconsiderately beautiful, waiting for people who had not changed their plans. For a while, I treated the plan like a memorial. I didn't want to touch it too much. Changing it felt disloyal. I kept the same folders, the same tabs, the same numbers. I even kept some of his notes that were no longer useful, because usefulness was not the only issue. Then one afternoon, I opened the spreadsheet and changed the title. It used to say, Frank and Carol Retirement. I changed it to Carol's Numbers. Just that. Nothing dramatic. No music playing. No big emotional scene. I typed it. Then I sat there with my hands in my lap. I think I whispered, Sorry, Frank. Then I laughed a little because Frank would have said, For heaven's sake, Carol, it's a spreadsheet. He would have been right. Mostly. But it still meant something. That's when I figured out that retirement felt strange because I was not just starting something. I was revising something we had already written together. And revising is slower than starting. The third thing I noticed is that time feels different when no one is expecting you somewhere. This one caught me off guard. I knew I would miss the people from work. I knew I might miss being useful. I did not know I would miss being expected. There is a difference. For decades, people expected me. Students first, then teachers, then principals, then board members, then nonprofit people who sent emails with the word quick in them, which almost never meant quick. I knew where to be. I knew what time. I knew the tone of each room. Then suddenly, no one needed me at 9 o'clock. No one noticed if I stayed in my robe until 10. That sounds lovely, and sometimes it was. I won't pretend I miss early meetings under fluorescent lights. I do not. I did my time. I have earned slower mornings. But after the first few weeks, the lack of expectation began to feel less like freedom and more like drifting. I remember one Thursday morning in May. It was raining in Greenville, a steady gray rain, the kind that makes the whole house feel like it's holding its breath. I made tea and sat in Frank's chair, which had become my chair by then. I had a book on my lap. My reading glasses were on the side table where I always put them and then spend 5 minutes looking for them. I had nowhere to be, not one thing. And instead of feeling peaceful, I felt slightly erased. That's too strong maybe, but close. I called my sister Patty. She is my advanced scout in all this, widowed before me, retired before me. Further down the road, though she would tell me not to call it a road. She doesn't like tidy metaphors. I said, "Did you ever feel strange when no one expected you?" She said, "Oh, honey, I still put appointments on the calendar just so the week has bones." The week has bones. That stayed with me. That's what work had given me, bones. Retirement gave me space, but I had to learn how to give it shape. And I don't fully understand why some days still resist that. Some days I can have 2 plans and still feel untethered. Other days I can have nothing planned and feel completely fine. Maybe that's just how this phase works. Or maybe I'm still learning the difference between empty and open. The fourth thing I noticed is that planned retirement doesn't protect you from identity loss. I don't love that phrase, but I don't have a better one. For many years, I knew how to introduce myself. I was a teacher. Then I was a curriculum coordinator. Then I was doing consulting work. Even after Frank died, work gave me a simple answer to a complicated question. Who are you right now? I'm working. That answer covered a great deal. It covered the grief some days. It covered the loneliness. It covered the fact that I didn't know what to do with the evenings. It covered the way the house felt after 5 o'clock. Then I retired and the covering came off. I was still a mother, still Jen and David's mom, still a grandmother, still Frank's wife, although I know people don't always know what to do with that sentence. Still Carol. But the work identity was gone. And the we identity had already changed. That left a quieter question. Who am I when no one is asking for the part of me I've practiced the longest? Teaching gave me a shape. So did marriage. So did being the person who could explain something clearly. Now, I still explain things. Apparently, I sit in a chair and talk into a camera and people tell me it helps, which I did not see coming. Frank would have been amused by this. He would have wanted to know the numbers. But early on, before the channel, before I found a little rhythm, I struggled with that question. I remember filling out a form at the doctor's office. Occupation. I paused. Then I wrote, retired. That is the correct answer. It also felt strangely insufficient, like writing leftover under meal. Perfectly accurate, not the whole story. I sat there in the waiting room with a clipboard on my knees and nearly cried over a blank line on a medical form. That was not my finest moment, but it was a real one. That's when I started to understand that even a planned retirement can feel strange because your identity arrives late. The date changes first. The life changes next. The self takes longer. The fifth thing I noticed is that grief can hide inside ordinary retirement feelings. This may be particular to widows and widowers, or maybe everyone has some version of it. Retirement brings up losses. Some are obvious, some are quiet. I expected to miss Frank. Of course I did. I did not expect to miss him in the cereal aisle, or while comparing car insurance, or when the air conditioner made a noise and I stood underneath it, as if staring might count as a repair strategy. Frank handled those things, not because I couldn't, because that was how we divided the world. He did the spreadsheets and the mechanical concerns and the steady practical things. I did conversations, school matters, family logistics, most holidays, and any situation involving a human feeling that required more than one sentence. We had a system. It wasn't perfect, it was ours. Retirement disrupted the system after he was already gone. That is what made it strange. I wasn't only learning how to be retired, I was learning which parts of our shared life I now had to carry alone. There was a day I got a notice about property tax and insurance. Nothing terrible, just a normal paper with normal numbers. I opened it at the kitchen table. I read it twice. Then I put it down and said, out loud, "Frank, what am I looking at?" Force of habit. Sorry. I still do that sometimes. The house was quiet, of course, so I opened the spreadsheet, his spreadsheet, then mine. I checked the line items. I made a note. I called the insurance office and asked 2 questions. The woman on the phone was very kind, which helped more than she knew. And then I cried for about 3 minutes. Not because of the money was fine. I cried because I had handled it. That sounds backwards. But grief is not always logical. Sometimes you're sad because you can't do something. Sometimes you're sad because you can. That's when I figured out retirement felt strange, because it kept proving I was capable in a life I had not chosen exactly this way. And capability is comforting. It is also lonely sometimes. There is one more thing, and I almost didn't include it because it sounds small. But small things are where retirement actually lives. Planned retirement still leaves you with ordinary Tuesdays. That may be the whole difficulty. Before I retired, retirement existed in special scenes: travel, morning walks, more time with grandchildren, tea on the porch, reading books that had been waiting patiently for me, maybe finally sorting the photos, maybe visiting Patty more often, maybe taking the first national park trip alone, though even saying that out loud took me a while. But real retirement is not made mostly of special scenes. It is made of Tuesdays. It is made of deciding what to have for lunch. It is made of realizing the dishwasher is full. It is made of going to the pharmacy. It is made of wondering whether to keep the big house because the house knows your whole life, and also because the gutters are not getting any younger. It is made of getting a call from Jen, who is being helpful in a way that feels slightly like management. It is made of David calling on Sunday and asking about his father, which still makes me grateful every time. It is made of mailing birthday cards to grandchildren, because I consider that non-negotiable. It is made of tea, weather, church, errands, small repairs, and deciding whether the quiet is peaceful today or just quiet. Frank and I planned the big parts. We did not plan the Tuesdays. No one really can. And maybe that is why retirement feels strange even when you planned for it. Because you are not only entering a stage of life, you are entering 1,000 ordinary days that have to become familiar one at a time. I am more settled now than I was at the beginning, not every day, but generally. I have a rhythm that mostly works. I have church. I have the children, though not in the same city always. I have Patty on Thursdays. I have this chair. I have this channel which still surprises me. I have the book where I write things down. I have Frank's photo behind me, though I don't point to it. I have a life. It is not the life we planned, but it is a life. And I think that distinction took me longer to accept than the retirement itself. Some days still feel strange, not bad, just not fully claimed yet. I think maybe that's allowed. A planned life can still surprise you. A careful person can still feel lost. A good retirement can still begin awkwardly. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's possible. Those are different things. If something in here sounds familiar, leave a comment. Tell me what felt strangest when you retired, even if you had planned carefully. Was it the empty calendar? The quiet house? The change in who you thought you were? The way money felt different once it was no longer coming from work? The way your spouse handled it differently than you did? Or, for those of you doing this alone, was it the way the plan changed after the person you planned with was no longer here? You don't have to make it neat. I actually prefer when the comments aren't neat. Real life usually isn't. And if you're not retired yet, tell me what part you think might feel strange. Sometimes naming it early helps. Not always, but sometimes. I read the comments. Jen thinks I read too many. David thinks they're good for me. Patty says I should stop reading the ones that tell me what to do with my hair. Patty is right about that. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to say. Thanks for being here.